I lay curled up on the tiny couch in my apartment, bare feet tucked under a thin throw steam rising from the chipped mug of green tea in my hand. My other hand rested on my forehead like it could stop the buzzing in my brain. The phone on the coffee table lit up again. Mom, Dad, Aaron. Their names blinked across the screen like a warning light that never turned off. 30 missed calls in the last 2 days alone. They weren't subtle. They never were. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I left. No slamming doors, no messy fights. I just disappeared. I remember it clearly. One quiet Tuesday evening, I packed a few clothes, my beat-up laptop, and a financial planning notebook into a duffel bag I'd had since college. The sun was dipping behind the apartment buildings when I walked out. No one stopped me. No one even asked where I was going. It was like I had always been the background noise in my own life. They were used to that version of me, Ellie Hart, 28, the dependable one, the practical daughter with the steady job in finance, the one who always paid the internet bill when they forgot, the one who just understands money better. But what they never understood was that I wasn't born to be the family safety net. Aaron, my older brother by 4 years, was the dreamer, the artist. The one Mom hugged when he failed his 5th side hustle and Dad proudly defended like he was a soldier back from war. Me, I didn't cause chaos, so they never paid attention. When I left, Dad was fixated on a spreadsheet, Mom was watching one of those endless crime shows, and Aaron was sprawled across the couch, headset on, deep into a video game tournament. I walked right past all 3 bag over my shoulder, and not a single one looked up. Now the phone buzzed with urgency, like their world had just noticed it was missing a key cog in the machine. I didn't answer. I just leaned back, let my shoulders relax, and exhaled. For the first time in years, I felt what peace might actually look like. My story isn't about a dramatic fallout or some grand betrayal in a single moment. It was slow, draining like a leak in the ceiling you ignore until the whole roof caves in. I started working at 16. Not because I wanted extra pocket money like my friends, but because I had to. After school, I'd bike to a tiny bakery and scrub floors until my hands were raw. My first paycheck went straight into buying a secondhand laptop. No stickers, no flair, just functional. Nobody asked how I was doing. But when Aaron's new art tablet broke, Mom drove to the store that same night to finance a brand new one. He needs tools to succeed, she said. And what about me? I was the tool. Aaron quit jobs like they were toxic relationships. Every boss was abusive, every coworker too competitive, and Mom, she'd nod like it all made sense. Nobody thrives in a hostile environment, she'd whisper, already reaching for her wallet. Meanwhile, when I got into Georgia Tech on a full ride, the only response I got was, "You really want to be that far away from your family." I used to think if I just kept showing up, kept proving myself, they'd finally see me. But the more I gave, the more I disappeared. Every time they needed help, rent short water, turned off car broke down, I was the one they called. And I always answered, I justified it in my head. I have a good job, I make decent money. What's the harm? But helping out became full-on support. Aaron wanted to take a digital design course. Could I spot him $300 just until he sells a few prints? Dad's back was hurting. Could I order his supplements, the good ones, not the off-brand stuff? They needed gas groceries, a roof patch, new tires. One by one, I said yes. Until one day, the mortgage, I was sitting at my desk at work, already exhausted, when Dad called. Voice low, serious, L, we're falling behind on the mortgage. Just for a couple of months until we figure things out, we're good for it. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I canceled the deposit on the apartment I'd been saving for. I transferred $980 to cover their payment, the first of many. And just like that, I became the silent provider of a household I no longer lived in. 2 years. $22,000. And not once did they say thank you. No one asked if I could afford it. No one wondered if I was okay. They just expected it. One Saturday, I came by the house with groceries. It was my routine. I'd drop off food, clean out the fridge, leave. But this time, Mom met me at the door, arms crossed. Ellie, we need to talk. What you're sending each month. It's not enough anymore. I blinked, not enough. Dad walked in. You live alone, you don't have a family to take care of. Meanwhile, we're struggling. Doesn't that seem unfair? I stared at them, at the people who raised me, at my brother lounging on the couch with a soda in hand, eyes glued to his game. Unfair, I said slowly. You mean after I've paid your mortgage for 2 years, paid for your meds, your car repairs, Aaron's Photoshop class? Aaron didn't even look up. It's not like you're starving. And that's when something inside me broke. I set the bags down on the counter. Didn't unpack them. Didn't restock the fridge. Didn't say another word. Just looked my mother in the eye and said, "If that's how you feel, then this is the last time you'll ever need to worry about what I send." Then I walked out. And this time, no one stopped me. I didn't drive home right away after walking out of my parents' house. Instead, I pulled into a quiet gas station a few blocks away, parked under a dim streetlight, and sat there for what felt like an hour. Hands gripping the steering wheel like it could hold me together. The rain had picked up, tapping softly against the windshield, almost rhythmic, like the universe trying to calm me down. I watched the droplets blur the lights of the city outside, and for once I didn't feel like rushing. No errands, no calls, no expectations, just the quiet, raw silence that follows a final decision. That night, I blocked all 3 numbers. Mom, Dad, and Aaron, not out of spite, but because I needed the noise to stop. I needed to hear my own thoughts. For once, I knew there would be backlash, dramatic texts, guilt-laced voicemails, long paragraphs about betrayal and how I abandoned the people who loved me the most. But I had nothing more to give. That realization came with a strange calm, like stepping off a treadmill that had been running non-stop for years. I went back to my apartment, took a long shower, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat on the floor with a cup of tea, staring at the quiet walls like they were holding me together. The next few weeks were quiet, beautifully, terrifyingly quiet. No surprise bills, no midnight emergencies, no last-minute grocery runs. My mornings started with coffee and sunlight. Not my mother's voice telling me about some payment Dad forgot to make. I slept better, ate better. I even started reading again. Small, forgotten habits that felt like tiny rebellions. I had my first free weekend in years and spent it walking around the city with no destination, letting the sun hit my face without needing to check my phone every 10 minutes. For the first time, I was living a life that was mine, not one rented out to everyone else. I thought maybe they'd get the message. Maybe the silence would finally teach them that love isn't supposed to feel like obligation. But silence doesn't fix people who refuse to listen. About a month after I cut contact, the emails started. First one from Mom. It was short. "Ellie, your dad got a letter from the bank. Things are serious. Please call me." I didn't respond. Then another one longer, layered in guilt. "I don't know what's happening to you lately. You've changed. Your family needs you. We're desperate. Please don't turn your back on us now." As if I hadn't already been carrying them for years. Still, I stayed silent. I had to. Because the second you answer, you're pulled back into their orbit. And I knew how that went. One favor turns into 10, and suddenly you're back to making excuses for skipping your own life. But that didn't stop the messages. Aaron started emailing too. His tone was different, less desperate, more entitled. "We all make sacrifices, Ellie. You're not the only one dealing with stress, but refusing to help now is just cruel." That was the word that got me, cruel. Not once had he worked a full-time job for more than 3 months. Not once did he pay a bill or show up when I needed support. And yet somehow, I was the cruel one. 2 months into my new life, I found myself back on my budgeting app, not to send money, but to actually plan for myself. I set up a savings goal for a down payment on a real home, my home. One that wouldn't come with guilt trips or last-minute calls. Every time I transferred money into that savings account, I felt like I was rebuilding a part of me that had been chipped away. I even joined a local community group, nothing major, just weekend meetups in the park, yoga, a book club. It felt foreign at first, like I had to relearn what it meant to have time for my own life, but slowly it started to feel normal. Then came the voicemail that shook me back to reality. I was leaving work late one evening, walking through the parking garage when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to listen. It was Dad. His voice was lower than usual, like he had finally run out of energy to pretend. Ellie, the house. We might lose it. The bank's been calling every day. We're out of time. Please, just call me back. He didn't even say goodbye, just silence. I stood there in the cold cement garage, keys in hand, phone pressed against my ear, and I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, maybe a little of both. I thought about all the money I'd sent, all the months I paid their mortgage without so much as a thank you. And now they were still behind. Something didn't add up. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the account I used for mortgage transfers. It was still linked to Dad's name. I hadn't looked at the actual statements before. I'd just trusted them. Trusted that the money was being used the way they said it was. But the moment I opened the history, my stomach dropped. The last payment toward the mortgage had been made 8 months ago, long before I stopped helping. That meant the last few payments I sent thousands of dollars had gone somewhere else. I checked my own transfer records. Everything lined up, every dollar accounted for, but none of it went to the bank after that last payment. I sat there frozen, trying to make sense of it. Had they just pocketed it, used it for something else, and lied? My chest tightened. I'd given up my apartment fund for this. Put my own life on hold to save a house that apparently hadn't even been maintained. I thought about all the times they looked me in the eye, claimed they were struggling, claimed they just needed a little help to stay afloat. And the whole time, they were already sinking. Or worse, they never even tried to stay above water. I didn't call right away. I needed to process what I had just learned. I needed to be sure before confronting them. The next morning, I contacted the mortgage company directly. After a few security checks and a long hold, I finally got a representative on the line. I explained that I had previously helped make payments and was checking on the current status. Her voice was professional but kind. The account is currently 8 months delinquent and under special review for foreclosure proceedings, she said. My mouth went dry. So there's been no payment since early this year, she confirmed. I thanked her and hung up my fingers, trembling as I closed the laptop. There it was. Proof my support had never gone where it was supposed to. They had lied to me repeatedly. Not just about being behind, but about using the money for the house at all. I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal or the fact that part of me wasn't even surprised. I remembered every pleading message, every emotional manipulation, every, "We're just trying to keep our home," but it was all a front, a performance, and I was the one buying the tickets. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept seeing numbers in my head, transaction dates, amounts, balances. I had been treated like a wallet with a heartbeat, and even after I left, they still assumed I'd keep paying without question. The next day, I sent a single text. I spoke to the bank. They said the house is 8 months past due. I kept sending money. Where did it go? No response. Hours passed. Then finally, the phone rang. It was Dad. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear another excuse, another performance. I just stared at the screen. Heart pounding, letting it ring out. And when it stopped, I let out a slow breath. I was done playing their game. I knew they'd try to spin it. That was always the pattern. First the guilt, then the excuses, then the rage when guilt stopped working. When I didn't pick up Dad's call, he left a voicemail. His voice was lower this time, almost like he was trying to sound calm but didn't know how. "Ellie, I know what this looks like, but it's not what you think. We needed that money for some urgent things. We meant to pay it back. We just didn't expect things to get worse so fast." He paused, like he was waiting for my forgiveness through the phone, then added, "Just call us, okay? We can figure this out together." I listened to the entire message in silence, holding my phone like it might break if I gripped it any harder. I didn't feel anger yet. That would come later. What I felt first was that familiar wave of exhaustion. The kind you get after running toward something you already know you'll never catch. I had been trying to earn trust in a place where truth had always been optional. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the carpet, thinking about how long I had let myself believe that helping them would lead to something respect appreciation, maybe even love that wasn't tied to usefulness. But now it was obvious. They weren't just careless. They were comfortable lying to me, comfortable watching me give up my own goals while they quietly reallocated the money to God knows what. That night, I didn't reach out. I didn't respond. I needed more than explanations. I needed honesty, and they had already proven they didn't deal in that currency. The next afternoon, I got an email from Aaron. The subject line just said family. The body of the message was short and almost insultingly casual. Ellie, you're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Yeah, maybe mom and dad weren't super transparent, but it's not like they wasted the money. Things came up. Life happens. Don't turn this into a war. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, stunned at how easily he dismissed everything. Not a single acknowledgement of my sacrifice. No apology. Just the same tone he always used, like I was being dramatic for setting boundaries. That was the moment I realized he'd never see it. He never had to struggle. He never had to pause his life so someone else could keep theirs running. To him, life happens meant someone else cleans up after you while you figure things out. I deleted the email without replying. If he wanted a war, I wasn't giving him one, but I wasn't backing down either. I needed answers, not from them, but from the evidence. I went through my records again, pulled out every statement, every receipt, every payment transfer I'd made since the day they first asked for help with the mortgage. The pattern was clear. For nearly a year after that, I'd been sending between $900 and $1 to $100 every month, always on time, always to the same account. I found 3 transactions labeled overage fund, each around $300, and I remembered Dad asking for just a bit more those months to cover extra repairs. Now, I wasn't sure if there had ever been repairs at all. I never saw invoices, never saw photos, never even got a thank you. Just more asks. I looked at the total. Over $22,000 in less than 2 years. I closed my laptop, sat back, and let the number settle into my chest. It wasn't just money. It was stolen trust, stolen time, and I wasn't even sure that house still had running water. A few days passed. Then one evening, just as I was pouring a cup of tea, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered out of habit. Ellie, it's Mom. Her voice was strained, but not soft. There was no warmth in it, just tension. I heard you called the bank, she said, skipping any pretense of how I was doing. I don't appreciate you going behind our backs like that. If you had questions, you should have come to us. I closed my eyes. There it was again. The way she always deflected made it about my behavior instead of the truth she didn't want to admit. I stayed quiet for a second, then said, I did come to you every month for 2 years. And I never once asked where the money was going because I trusted you. There was a pause. Then she said, We were overwhelmed. Ellie, you don't understand what it's like. Aaron lost his contract work. Your dad's been having health problems. Things snowballed. I leaned against the counter and asked the question I'd been holding on to since I saw the bank report. Why didn't you pay the mortgage? Her response wasn't direct. It was a slow backpedal into excuses. We had to pay down some other debts first. There were things we couldn't ignore. Medical bills, credit cards. We thought we could catch up. That was the most honest she'd been. And still, it wasn't an answer. Just a soft dodge wrapped in guilt. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. A crisis, followed by silence. Then a lie, disguised as a favor to me. You didn't even tell me, I said. You just let me keep sending money knowing the house was already sinking. She sounded tired now. You're being cruel, Ellie. We're your parents. We didn't do this to hurt you. But that's the thing. It didn't matter whether it was intentional. What mattered was they did it anyway and never once thought to stop. After that call, I didn't hear from them for 3 days. Then a new message came in from Dad. This one was short. You said you wanted honesty. Fine, the money helped us cover some personal debts. We didn't think it would get this bad. We're not proud of it, but we're still your family. That has to mean something. I stared at the message and felt nothing. Not rage, not relief, just emptiness. I didn't want more apologies. I wanted accountability. I wanted anyone to say they saw what this did to me, but all I ever got was justification. Always a reason. Always a bigger problem than my own. The final straw came that weekend. I was walking out of the grocery store, arms full of bags, when I saw a notification from Venmo. Aaron had tried to request $200 from me. The note said, "For Mom's meds, we're all doing our part." I stood in the parking lot, blinking at my phone in disbelief. That wasn't just audacity. That was proof they still didn't get it. That even after everything, even after the lies and manipulations were laid bare, they still believed I owed them something. I declined the request. No message, no explanation, just no. It was a small act, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd chipped away for years. That night, I finally allowed myself to feel angry. Not the quiet resentment I'd carried for years, but real, sharp anger. Not because they were struggling, but because I had given them everything I had and they treated it like an allowance. I remembered the nights I skipped dinner to stretch my budget, the vacations I never took, the apartment I never moved into, all so they could make choices without consequences. I wasn't angry for saying no, I was angry I hadn't said it sooner. By Monday, I made a decision. I called the mortgage company and had my name removed from anything related to that account. I told them I would no longer be involved. I sent an email to Mom, Dad, and Aaron. No emotion, no drama. Just facts, effective immediately. I will no longer be providing financial support. Do not request money. Do not imply responsibility. I've done my part. You'll need to handle the rest. Then I blocked them again. Not to punish, but to protect. I didn't know what they'd do with that information. I didn't care. I had finally closed a chapter. I should have ended years ago. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in after you cut someone off. Not the loud silence filled with what ifs or regrets, but the quiet one that feels almost hollow. Like standing in an empty room after the furniture's been cleared out. The noise is gone, but the echoes still bounce around for a while. That's what my life felt like in the weeks after I sent that final message and blocked them all again. I didn't cry. I didn't replay their voices or scroll through old photos. I just moved on, slowly, deliberately. The weight they'd placed on me for years had been lifted, but it left bruises, and I could still feel the pressure in certain moments, checking my bank balance, hearing a ringtone that sounded too familiar, seeing someone on the street who looked like Aaron from the side. But for the most part, I was finally able to breathe in my own space without debt or guilt crowding the corners. I spent the following month fixing things, nothing dramatic, just small restorations of self. I reworked my budget, adjusted my goals, started cooking again instead of living on takeout and caffeine. My apartment once, just a quiet escape, began to feel like home. I bought a small bookshelf and filled it with titles I'd promised myself I'd read years ago. I swapped my ancient laptop for a newer model, not top tier but reliable, and signed up for a course on personal investing. Not because I had a plan yet, but because I finally had time and mental space to think about a future that wasn't chained to someone else's survival. It was surreal how much clarity came once the noise was gone. I used to think peace was earned through sacrifice. Turns out, it's born in boundaries. Even my weekends looked different. I didn't dread Friday nights anymore. I'd go on walks through the park sometimes for hours, just observing people living their lives like they weren't constantly tethered to someone else's expectations. One Sunday afternoon, I stumbled upon a small street market, handmade candles, local artists, fresh pastries, and wandered around aimlessly until I found a booth selling prints of watercolor cityscapes. The vendor smiled and asked if I was an artist. I almost laughed. I said no, but in that moment, I realized I could have been. not because I had a secret talent, but because I had forgotten I could be anything at all. For so long, my identity had been rooted in function, in what I could give, what I could fix. Without that role, I was rediscovering who I actually was. Then came the email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Miriam, my mom's older sister. She was always the outlier. Quiet, private, lived out in the suburbs and rarely showed up for family gatherings. But she had never been unkind. The subject line read, I wasn't sure if I should reach out. My hands hesitated over the trackpad. I clicked it anyway. The message was careful, warm, and free of judgment. She said she'd recently spoken with my mother, who mentioned I'd cut ties. She wasn't writing to interfere, she explained, but to say that if I ever needed to talk or simply wanted a neutral space, she'd be there. No pressure, just an open door. I read the message twice. It didn't accuse or demand. It didn't beg for sides or use guilt as currency. It was the first communication in months that didn't ask me for something. And that made it feel rare. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to dip back into anything related to my family, even from a distance. But I saved it. Not just in my inbox, but in my mind. A reminder that not everyone in my bloodline operated on entitlement and manipulation. Sometimes kindness could still exist quietly without expectation. About a week later, I was at work when my phone lit up with a notification from the bank. At first, I thought it was just a statement update, but then I saw the subject line notice of final foreclosure. Property at 13-82 Whitmore Drive. My breath caught in my throat. That was the address of my parents' house. I clicked the message, heart pounding, and scanned the details. It confirmed everything. The house was officially going into foreclosure. The grace period had ended. They were out of time. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. I wasn't shocked. I had expected this. But seeing it in writing made it real in a way that voicemails and pleading emails hadn't. The house I grew up in, the one I used to imagine returning to after college, the one I had saved again and again without ever living in it myself. Gone. I thought maybe I'd feel triumphant. That part of me would whisper, they deserved this. But instead, all I felt was tired, not grief, not pity, just the ache of something finally falling after you've held it up far too long. That night, I lit one of the candles I'd bought at the street market, sat on the floor with my tea, and tried to make peace with the end of a chapter that never really gave me a beginning. It was strange to mourn a house that never truly felt like home, but still, I remembered the small things, the creaky hallway outside my old room, the way sunlight used to pour in through the kitchen window, the swing set Dad built when I was 8. Memories can hold both love and damage at once, and that's what made it complicated. It wasn't about the building. It was what it represented, the version of family I wanted to believe in, the hope that things might someday balance out. But hope without action is just a story we tell ourselves to avoid letting go. 2 days later, I received another email. This one from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was spam, but it was legitimate. Attached was a scanned letter with my name on it, formally notifying me that my name had been included as a financial contributor in some documents related to the house. Apparently, at some point during those 2 years, Dad had tried to co-sign certain payment agreements in my name without telling me. Nothing had moved forward because I never signed anything. But the lawyer wanted to confirm that I was aware I wasn't. I was stunned. I reread the letter over and over. My own father had quietly tried to use my name as leverage. Not just my money, my name, my credit, my future, and never said a word. That was the moment the numbness cracked and the anger finally came. Hot, sharp, clear. Not rage, not the kind that explodes. This was cold fury, the kind that settles deep in your bones. I sat there, hands shaking, and whispered aloud. They would have dragged me down with them. And the truth is, they already had. But this was the line. They didn't just ask for help. They tried to take it without permission. I spent the next day on the phone, contacted the lawyer, confirmed my non-involvement, requested documentation stating I had never signed or agreed to any debt related to the property. Then I called my own financial advisor and added extra safeguards to my credit password protections, freezes monitors. I wasn't playing defense anymore, I was building walls. Not out of fear, but because I had finally accepted that love without respect is just a slower form of destruction. That weekend, I responded to Aunt Miriam. I thanked her for reaching out, told her I appreciated the message. I didn't go into detail, just said I was doing okay, that I was starting fresh. She replied within hours, said she was glad to hear it, offered to meet for coffee sometime. I said maybe. Not because I wasn't open to it, but because I was still learning what safety felt like. And sometimes healing means not rushing into new spaces until you've figured out how to stand in your own. By the end of the month, I had officially started a new savings goal, a real one. Not just emergency funds for other people, I began researching first-time homebuyer options not because I was in a rush to leave my apartment, but because it felt good to dream again. To imagine a space where I wasn't paying for someone else's second chance. A place where I could hang art on the walls without hearing Aaron say I was wasting money. A place with no memories layered in disappointment. For the first time, I felt the ground under my feet was mine. No more balancing on shifting promises, no more guilt-built loyalty, just quiet, steady steps in a direction that belonged to me. It had been almost 4 months since I last spoke to my family, and the silence had settled like dust in an abandoned room. Quiet, but always there. My days had taken on a rhythm early mornings with soft light through the window, black coffee, and a chipped mug. Work that no longer felt like an escape, but a space I actually wanted to grow in. I started sleeping through the night again. My dreams weren't tangled with voices asking for things I could no longer give. I even started writing, a little something I hadn't done since college. Just thoughts and ideas. But they came from me, and not from the pressure of being someone else's solution. That was progress, and I was proud of it. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Which is why when I saw his name on my screen, my chest clenched before I even read the message, Aaron. No subject line, just a single sentence in the preview. You deserve to know what really happened. I didn't want to open it, not because I was scared of what it said, but because I had finally built something clean out of the wreckage and I didn't know if I was ready to dig through ashes again. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. It sits quietly waiting. So later that night, after work, after dinner, after convincing myself I wouldn't, I opened it. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs, but it changed everything. He didn't start with an apology, that would have felt fake anyway. He started with a question. Do you remember the day you left? What Mom said. And I did. Every word. If it's such a burden, then don't come back. He said, what I didn't know was that after I left, things didn't just fall apart, they imploded. The credit cards they'd used in my name without telling me were frozen. The side account Dad had opened to redirect some of the mortgage funds had been flagged for irregular activity. Apparently, one of the banks launched a fraud investigation and everything spiraled. Aaron said he didn't know about any of it until months later, that he'd just been told I pulled away and abandoned them. But when he found out the truth, when he saw the bank notices, the debt trail, the forged signature attempts, he said he started asking questions, said he got stonewalled, that Mom insisted it was temporary, and Dad told him it was handled, but it wasn't, not even close. He didn't defend what they did, didn't excuse it either, but he said something that stuck with me. I think they convinced themselves it wasn't wrong because it was you, because you always forgave them, always helped. They thought you'd just keep doing it. I read that line over and over, not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed something I hadn't said out loud. They didn't just use me. They built a system where using me felt normal, justified, expected. Aaron ended the email by saying he wasn't writing to reconnect, wasn't asking for money or forgiveness. He just thought I should know. Then he signed off with, "You were right to leave. I just wish I had seen it sooner." I sat there in the dim light of my apartment reading those words again and again. There was no relief, just a cold sort of validation. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't abandoned them. I escaped. For a moment, I wondered if this was his version of closure or if he was trying to hand me mine, but I didn't reply. Not right away, not out of anger, just instinct. Some truths don't require conversation, they only require space to land. That night, I pulled out my old journal, the one I'd buried in the back of my closet. I hadn't written in it since my first job out of college. I flipped through the pages, seeing versions of myself I'd forgotten. A girl working 70-hour weeks, calculating grocery costs to the penny, and still sending half her paycheck home. I saw the entry from the week I canceled my apartment deposit to help with their temporary situation. I saw my handwriting change over time from hopeful to hurried to tired. And it hit me. I'd been writing this story for years, just never with an ending. The next morning, I wrote one last entry I started with one sentence. They didn't break me, they emptied me. And somehow that distinction mattered because being broken means you're shattered beyond repair. But emptied can be refilled, rebuilt, reimagined. I closed the journal, wrapped it in a piece of fabric and stored it in a small box. Not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because I needed to remember the path I walked to get here. The choices, the clarity, the cost. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. Shaky, but familiar. It was from my mother. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for 2 days, letting it sit on my kitchen counter like a guest. I wasn't sure I wanted to entertain. On the third morning, I tore it open slowly. It started without a greeting. "No, dear Ellie." Just her voice and words exactly the way she always sounded when she was trying to stay composed. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. Said she didn't recognize the damage they'd caused until everything collapsed. Said she realized too late that silence wasn't peace. It was erasure, that she had erased my needs, my voice, my personhood in favor of comfort and control. She wrote that she missed me. Not for what I did, but for who I was before they drained me. Then she wrote something that felt different. "You didn't walk away from family. You walked away from a version of us that never saw you clearly, and I can't blame you for that." For the first time, I felt something shift. Not reconciliation, not healing, but honesty, raw and unpolished. It didn't erase anything, but it acknowledged everything. And that was a start. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't appreciate the letter, but because I didn't know what I wanted yet. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a process. And I had only just begun mine, but I tucked the letter into the back of a drawer, not out of obligation, but because one day I might want to read it again. Maybe even believe it fully. Spring came early that year. The air smelled different. Lighter, I found myself opening the windows more, letting the breeze move through the apartment like it was cleansing something I couldn't name. I made a list of things I wanted to do, real things, not reactionary tasks, like scrambling to fix someone else's life. I wanted to take a solo trip somewhere coastal and quiet. I wanted to paint something, even if it was terrible. I wanted to volunteer, not out of guilt, but from joy. And I wanted to buy a chair for my reading corner, something cozy and mine. One Saturday, I visited an antique store I'd passed 100 times but never entered. And there, in the back corner, tucked between a shelf of dusty record players and a crooked lamp, was a deep blue armchair with wooden arms and velvet upholstery. I sat in it, leaned back, and closed my eyes. It felt like it had been waiting for someone. For me, I bought it without hesitation, carried it home like a victory trophy. Set it by the window and stacked my favorite books beside it. That night, I curled up in it with a blanket and a cup of tea, the city glowing outside my window, and I realized something I hadn't been able to see clearly before. All the things I thought I needed from them, approval, gratitude, belonging, I had learned to give to myself. Not because they finally came around, but because I stopped waiting for them to. Some endings don't come with a bang or a breakdown. Sometimes they arrive like the slow bloom of spring, quietly rewriting the landscape without asking for attention. That's how the final chapter of this story began. Not with another crisis or confrontation, but with an email from a realtor. I'd been browsing listings casually for months, more a daydream than a plan, but one property caught my eye, a small townhouse on the edge of the city. Nothing extravagant, but clean, sunlit, and tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac that felt more like a village than a suburb I visited once. Then again, and on the third visit, as I stood on the back porch with wind brushing against my shoulders, I knew this wasn't a backup plan. This was mine. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. My savings, for once untouched by someone else's emergency, covered the deposit. The loan was pre-approved. No cosigner, no explaining where my money went, just me. A signature that belonged only to me. The day I got the keys, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just stood in the middle of the empty living room, surrounded by silence, and breathed. The walls echoed, slightly bare and waiting. But the echo didn't scare me. It sounded like potential. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not coworkers, not even Aunt Miriam, who had slowly become a gentle presence in my life through short emails and kind check-ins. This space was sacred. It wasn't built from pain, but from persistence. No one had given it to me. No one could take it away. That mattered more than I thought it would. 3 weeks after moving in, I received another letter, handwritten. This time from Dad, I recognized his penmanship immediately. Stiff, careful, the kind of writing that looks like someone's trying not to make a mistake. He started by saying he'd heard about the foreclosure being finalized, that everything had been packed into a storage unit and they were staying in a small apartment out in Doraville. He didn't ask for help, didn't ask for money. He wrote about how quiet it had gotten between them, how Aaron barely spoke to either of them anymore, how Mom still talked like I'd come back eventually. Then he said this: "There's something I never told you, and maybe I should have. Maybe it would have changed everything. Or maybe it would have made it worse. But I need to say it now." What followed was a confession. Back when I was in college, when things got tight and the economy dipped, he had taken out a small loan under both our names, without telling me. He justified it by saying I was too young to understand how bad things were, that it was just a buffer until he got back on his feet. But the payments fell behind and eventually it slipped into collections. He paid it off years later and never mentioned it, assuming if I didn't notice it was fine. But it had been on my record once, and he thought I should know. I sat at the kitchen counter, the letter trembling slightly in my hands, not because of the content, but because of the timing. Now, after everything, he waited until the last bridge was ash to say what should have been said years ago. And yet there was no fire in me this time. Just a quiet understanding that I couldn't carry this too. That there was no weight left in my heart for betrayal disguised as protection. I placed the letter in a folder, with the rest not out of nostalgia, but because one day I might want to remember how far I walked without them, and how each lie laid the stone for my own path forward. A week later, I saw Aunt Miriam for coffee. We sat outside a small cafe tucked between 2 bookstores. She brought me a plant for my new home, a little potted rosemary bush that smelled like something I could grow into. We didn't talk about my parents, not directly, but she said something as we sipped our drinks that stayed with me. Sometimes the people who raise us are so broken themselves they don't know they're breaking us too, and that doesn't excuse it. But it explains why healing can't start with them. I nodded. Not because I needed the permission, but because someone finally understood without me having to explain. Spring turned into summer. My new home began to fill with pieces of myself. An old record player in the corner, mismatched mugs from thrift stores, a rug I picked without asking if it matched anything. The bookshelf grew. The chair became my favorite place to end the day. I planted herbs on the windowsill. Some lived, some didn't, but even the dead ones felt like part of something I was building with my own hands. Peace, it turns out, isn't always a perfect space. Sometimes it's messy and quiet and real. Then one afternoon, a message came from an unknown number. Just a few words. If we lose everything, I hope you can live with yourself. I didn't respond. I didn't even save the number. I just stared at it, then deleted it without a second thought. Not because it didn't sting, but because I refused to let that narrative shape the rest of my life. Guilt was their currency, but I was no longer buying. What they lost was never mine to keep, and what I gained came not from revenge, but from reclaiming the one thing they never truly gave me, myself. I used to think forgiveness was a door I had to walk back through, that maybe one day I'd return and say I understood. But forgiveness, I learned, is something softer. It doesn't mean reunion. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to carry the anger anymore. Not for them, but for me. So I let it go, piece by piece. Not because they asked, but because I was done holding things that didn't belong to me. One evening, I sat on my porch as the sun slipped below the rooftops. The air was warm. My tea was cooling in my hand. And for the first time, I felt still. Not waiting. Not escaping. Just still. I thought about the version of me who had quietly packed her things and walked out without a single person noticing. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't weak for leaving, that her silence was not surrender, it was survival. And eventually it would become her strength. This is not a story of revenge. Not really. It's a story of remembering. Of recognizing that sometimes the only way to love yourself is to walk away from the people who taught you that love has to hurt. I didn't win anything. I didn't destroy anyone. I just stopped giving until it cost me nothing left. And in doing so, I found what I'd been looking for all along. Not approval, not closure, but peace. So, if you're reading this and you've been the one holding everything together while breaking quietly in the background, I hope you know this. You don't have to explain your boundaries to people who never respected them. You don't have to destroy yourself to be seen. And if one day you choose to walk away, not out of spite, but out of necessity, that choice will not make you heartless. It will make you whole. Story 2. I came home to my tiny apartment in Seattle fatigued from a family get-together that lasted for a whole weekend, until I accessed my banking app to transfer funds for the power bill. Everything appeared to be as usual. The number on the screen made my eyes become hazy. 83 hours. 52. I made 3 checks. However, I was positive it wasn't a malfunction or the trickery of my weary eyes. I had more over $9,000 in that account only 2 days earlier. I could feel my body losing blood. My heart thumped as if someone with trembling hands were banging from within my chest. I phoned the bank right away. The representative said that the transactions were made from a device that had previously been logged in with the same IP address as a personal computer after asking a few security questions. We recently had our largest family get-together of the year at my mom's house, so I got up, got my keys, and went right back there. I was still unable to get the pictures of everyone smiling and hugging out of my head. But a few hours later, I was standing there once more, reaching into the cabinet for a drink of water in the old kitchen where I grew up. My heart continues to pound from astonishment. "You've already returned, my sister." As if nothing had occurred, Amanda's voice drifted in from the living room, informal and carefree. With her legs crossed and a glass of red wine in her hand, she sat on the couch. She had not the least bit of worry on her face. I just looked at my account. I made an effort to speak steadily, but my throat's constriction betrayed me. My brother-in-law Nathan came out of the kitchen with a can of Coke. With a half-dismissive, half-amused expression, he leaned against the refrigerator. "Oh, that," Nathan grinned. "Alyssa, you didn't need that money as much as we did. I felt like I was slapped across the face by it. stunned and unable to utter a word. I froze. Amanda shrugged as if I was exaggerating and laughed quietly. "Stop being so dramatic," she advised. "You're doing a fantastic job. No children, no debt. You're by yourself." I looked at my mother. Her face was as composed as ever as she knitted while seated in the corner. "Mom, were you aware of this?" She sighed without raising her gaze. She spoke softly as if I had just complained about the soup's excessive saltiness. "You're so sensitive all the time. You possess more. Why not lend a hand a little?" My dad was staring at his phone as I turned to face him. He muttered without raising his gaze, "Avoid using abusive language. It's a family-run company. How did you even obtain my financial information?" I was shocked by what I was hearing. Amanda gave a shrug. "I saw that your account was still signed in when I accessed my mother's computer. If you failed to log off..." She stated it as if I were to blame, as if their actions were entirely warranted. My claws dug into my palms as my fists clenched. My heart was pounding. Nathan shrugged, like if nothing had happened. "It's not as if we purchased luxuries to make ends meet, rent groceries. We would be starved." Otherwise, I gave them a look. Each and every one. Not a single guilty, not a single apology. Take a look, not even an acceptable justification. How could I have earned this? No one appeared to care, but I murmured. Amanda muttered and threw back her hair. "You can regain it. Be less theatrical." I took up my handbag gently. I was not stopped. Nobody inquired about my well-being. My mother stated that only out of habit. Remember to have supper on Sunday. I made my way to the door, empty within heart, thumping. However, I stopped at the doorway before I went, put a hand on the knob, and turn around. "If you believe that, I will just overlook this. Watch to see what comes next." Amanda laughed. "You're acting so dramatic, please." To be honest, Alyssa, we were more in need of that money than you were. Avoid becoming self-centered. Oh, I didn't answer. It had begun to rain outside and a new storm was subtly brewing inside of me. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white as I drove through the downpour. Even though the traffic signal ahead was red, every icy word I had just heard was making my head spin. You didn't need that money as much as we did. No apologies, no regret. I was unable to awaken from what felt like a nightmare. I wasn't ready to return home just yet. I parked into the parking lot close to Green Lake Park, where I typically exercise on Saturday mornings since I wanted some air. I shut off the car, sat quietly, and opened the banking app again. That number remained. I couldn't explain. It was as cold and blatant as Amanda's face. I was taken aback. All I wanted was to be employed as a marketing manager at a big pharmaceutical firm when I was 27. As I was still getting used to my new life and career, Amanda gave a call. "Hello." My phone died. "Are you able to find me any money?" I didn't hesitate. I thought they were family. Next up was Nathan, who had been out of work for about 6 months. "Till I find anything. I only need a few hundred to get by." "Oh," he said. "1 year for Haley's birthday." I kept quiet. I received a suggested gift list from Amanda. The least expensive item cost more than $200. When my mother phoned, I wanted to say no, but her voice was pleasant. "Nothing is being given to your niece. She is ecstatic. We're not as fortunate as you are." Suddenly, I was the first person they called for financial difficulties. Amanda received a new vehicle. A portion of the down payment came from me. Nathan misplaced his wallet. That evening, I sent money. Mom has a past due power bill. Each time I took money out of savings. "You're the most stable member of the family," was all they said. At no time did they inquire. "How are you doing?" Never pause to reflect. There were times when I waited to buy items for myself, skipped trips, or counted every penny. I declined a trip with my closest buddy a few months ago because I needed the money to pay Nathan's rent. Amanda, I now see that what they said was not appreciation, but rather a praise. It was an implicit proclamation. It's your responsibility. The rain continued to pour. I switched on the radio in the hopes that the sound would ease the pain in my chest. However, nothing could make the sense of being viewed as a tool. Go away, not a sister or a daughter, just a heartbeat credit card. It buzzed on my phone. Mom texted me. "You're unhappy about the money," Amanda said. "Don't worry about it, my love. We are related. Family." Now, why was that word so heavy? I used to believe that people would recognize if I was patient and giving enough. Perhaps express gratitude. Ask how I was at the very least. However, they never did because I didn't need support in their opinion. It is also anticipated that the person who is not in need of assistance will assist everyone else. I opened my notes app after taking a big breath. Every late-night call, every payment I've ever made, I began to write everything down whenever I denied myself for them so I wouldn't forget, but not to beg for it back. I will never again allow myself to be placed in such situation. The rain started to stop. Through the gloomy clouds, pale sunshine peeps through. I put my hands on the wheel and sat up straight. I wasn't looking back this time. I went back to my flat that evening. I'm still in shock at Nathan's comments, which are still ringing in my head. "You didn't need that money as much as we did." Don't apologize. No justification. Absolute, unfathomable entitlement. The lost money, however, wasn't what really kept me going. It was the total lack of concern on the part of the family. I was unable to let it go. Nor did I intend to. I contacted the bank the following morning and asked for a complete transaction record for the previous 10 days. There were 17 pages in the file. I highlighted all of the questionable charges in red on the printed copy. I was interested in one anonymous transaction. An IP address that matched my mom's home was used to send about $2,800. Yes, I had previously used a computer there, but I had never opened my bank account and signed in. All I had done was check my calendar for emails. Someone had accessed it, recalled my information, and bided their time in that residence. I went back to my mom's place that weekend as if it were a casual visit. The air was heavy with anxiety, yet the roast smelled the same as usual. Amanda avoided looking at me as she sat at the head of the table, overly at ease. Nathan poured lemonade as if there were no fire beneath the surface. I wasted no time. I went over every transaction I had made, putting the papers on the table. I said Mom's computer was used to access my account. That day, I was present. Yes, but I didn't access my bank account. Who then stole the information? Nobody responded, as if I had just inquired about the weather. My mother continued to pick at her salad with her head down. Dad quietly sat behind his newspaper. Amanda was the only one who spoke. She spoke in a small but sarcastic voice. "It was left logged in by you. We didn't actually hack anything." I gave her a direct look. "You acknowledge it then?" Amanda gave a shrug. "I just noticed it was open." "You failed to lock it. Furthermore, it's not like you've ever assisted before." This time I refused to agree with a gentle clink. Nathan put down his glass. "You're so dramatic all the time. This is not theft. They're supporting one another. Family is involved." "No," I said firmly. "When someone asks and the other person agrees, that person is helping." This was taking without asking. My mom finally looked up, her voice gentle like she was explaining something to a stubborn child. "Alyssa, you live alone, have a good job, no burdens. Amanda's raising a child, Nathan. Still figuring things out. Family is about sharing, and sharing means quietly draining my entire savings." My voice began to tremble, not from anger, but from pain. My dad folded his newspaper and looked up, visibly annoyed. "Don't be so harsh. You've always been the strongest one in this family. You know no one else could handle it, so everyone trusted you." "Trusted me." I let out a dry laugh, stealing personal information and emptying my account. That's what you call trust. Why not just call it what it is? Taking advantage? Amanda slammed her hand on the table. The first time she lost her cool. We didn't splurge on anything. It was for rent medication for Haley, car repairs. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. What about me? I looked at each person in that room, the people I once called family. I was exhausted too, when I worked 60 hours a week to pay off your debt, when I canceled my vacation just to keep Nathan from getting evicted, when I ate instant noodles for 3 weeks to help Mom pay the utility bill. I'd been tired for a long time, but I never complained because I thought I was doing the right thing. But clearly, all I did was enable everyone selfishness. No one said a word. Only the ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence. I stood up, grabbed the folder and my purse. Before leaving the room, I paused and looked at Mom. If this is how you treat the only person who never asked for a single cent, don't be surprised when I start taking back what I deserve. Nathan let out a mocking laugh. What are you going to do, Alyssa? Call the cops. I looked him straight in the eye, my gaze steady. Just wait and see. Then I walked out of the house. I once called home for the first time without a trace of regret. Only a rising sense of resolve in my chest. I got home just as dusk settled over Seattle. The air felt thicker than usual, heavy with the fury still brewing inside me. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled out a file folder. I had kept receipts, messages, transfers, email, confirmations, even screenshots from years ago. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew someday my quiet sacrifices would need proof. I began organizing everything from the very first payment, $92.50 for Amanda's phone bill 3 years ago, to the biggest one, $200 wired to Nathan for an urgent issue. I had full bank statements, email confirmations over 3 nights. I built a spreadsheet categorizing each expense. I color-coded everything green for medical, yellow for living costs, red for the ones with no explanation. Such the $350 Nathan spent on a gaming system last Black Friday. I remembered it distinctly since I had to cancel a winter trip with coworkers just to make my insurance payment. On Monday morning, I went to the Financial Crimes Division downtown, taking all the printed documents, a USB containing the spreadsheet, and a completed complaint form. A young cop called Harper handled my case. She flipped over each page, nodding as she read. Will initiate a preliminary inquiry under financial fraud and unlawful access to personal information. Do you have names of the persons involved? I do. I responded, handing her the list. Amanda Walker, Nathan Walker, Donna Grant, my mother, Paul Grant, my father. I left the precinct under dismal sky, but with a flicker of brightness inside me. Not because I wanted them punished, but because I eventually quit being silent. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was in a Zoom meeting when an unknown number called. I silenced the phone and headed onto my balcony to answer. It was Harper. We've finished the preliminary inquiry, Miss Alyssa. We have enough justification to proceed. Today, the investigation team will go to the people's homes. I went cold. It wasn't contentment. I had a greater sense of relief. Someone finally witnessed what I had gone through that evening when I was making supper after all these years. My phone kept ringing Mom first, followed by Amanda and Nathan. I didn't answer. After that, the texts began to come in. Give your mom a call right now. Alyssa, what are you doing? Have you actually contacted the police? None of them got a response from me. One old neighbor texted me 1 hour later. Outside Donna's residence are 3 individuals wearing coats bearing the Financial Crimes Unit logo. They wanted to know about you too. I got to work early the next day. When I entered the elevator, coworkers gave me a few odd looks. My manager then came up to me, a local reporter called, and asked us to confirm a financial probe that was connected to your name. Putting a soft touch on my shoulder, he whispered. Although we didn't confirm anything, please let us know if you require more time. I gave a quiet smile. It's all right. I'm acting appropriately. I saw the lights from the nearby apartment shine as I sat at my window that evening. I could still hear Amanda's remarks. I promise that you are the sole reason this family is still alive. Yes, I'm the reason they lived. However, they never considered me a human being, just a tool, a wallet. That gadget had finally had enough. I scribbled one sentence in my journal after opening it. The family bank is not me. My name is Alyssa. My name appeared on a page unrelated to a bill or money transfer for the first time, freedom a person, and only my name are all at last within grasp. As I was getting ready for work on Monday morning, I received the first message. A familiar line appeared on the screen of my phone. Call me Mom. I didn't open it. Her voicemail arrived an hour later as I was making coffee. Alyssa, this is going too far. You don't need to go this far, even if I am aware that there has been miscommunication. Would you kindly give me a call back? A shiver went through me as I put down the coffee. She spoke in the same tone Amanda wrote a lengthy text around midday that seemed soft and compassionate. I have a frozen bank account. Haley's tuition is beyond my means. I'm at a loss on what to do. You prevail. All right, are you content now? That latter statement made me shudder as though I had created the game and they were only coerced into playing. However, I was aware of the reality. I had no intention of winning, I had just finished suffering. Harper contacted the next day to provide an update. We have verified the amount that was taken out and abused Alyssa Amanda's illegal transfers are now being investigated. Your parents utilized a portion of the money for unlawful mortgage payments, and Nathan is accused of taking money from an unauthorized device. This money may be recovered. Oh, I was at a loss for how to feel I was hurt. Not because of the repercussions they were now facing, but rather because they were still baffled by how this had ever happened. Nathan phoned many times that evening. His number was blocked by me. 10 minutes or less later, an unknown email address sent it to me. Please, Alyssa, my employment has been suspended. They are looking into my accounts. I can't let one mistake cost me everything. Is there nothing you can say to assist me? The haughtiness, the derision, the earlier laughs, lost panic barely disguised took its place. I didn't flinch, though. My dad sent me a note on Thursday morning. I paused at just one sentence since he seldom ever reached out. The bank sent a warning about foreclosure. We forfeit the house if we don't make the payment within 30 days. I read it repeatedly. No admission, no apology, just a chilly declaration and a glimmer of hope that I would intervene to make it right as usual. That night, I stood by my window and watched the streetlight spill across the glass, but I didn't respond. I recalled all the times I had to forego lunch in order to send my mother money on time. Amanda contacted me, crying, so I canceled the dates. I had offered my tranquility in addition to my money. I wasn't going back this time. That weekend, I headed toward the shores of Edmonds, where as a child, my dad and I would go fishing every summer. Nobody was aware of my whereabouts. Nobody inquired about my well-being. The same individuals who formerly referred to me as their lifeline now simply wanted to repair the harm they had created. My phone came back on in the middle of the afternoon. Mom sent a message. Please, Alyssa, please. I'm aware that I was mistaken, but I'm not sure how I'll fare if we lose the house. Don't desert me, please. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. My chest constricted at that message, but not because of guilt from the knowledge that she was still considering the house rather than me. Nobody inquired about my well-being. I felt the ocean wind carry me away as I put my phone down and strolled onto the sand. My chest feeling heavy. I knew I had reached the most difficult section, the part where I was no longer expected to bear what was never mine, but also the part where they called me nasty, unappreciative, and even destructive. For the first time in years, I gazed out at the huge expanse of sea. I wasn't considering late-night calls, bills, or demands for money. I was reflecting on who I was and how I was finally beginning to feel bit by bit. Without alerting anybody, I requested an extended leave of absence 3 weeks later. On a somber Wednesday morning, I packed everything neatly into a rental car and drove out of Seattle feeling as though I were losing the old skin of a woman who had been suffocated by unreasonably high expectations. I came to Boulder, Colorado, a little town I had visited on a business trip years before. I only had a few hours at the time to explore the downtown area and enjoy coffee at a quaint cafe with warm yellow lights and mellow jazz. However, the serenity I experienced that day stayed with me. It became the location where I decided to start over. A little studio apartment with a view of the mountains was rented by me, large windows letting in the early light and white walls. In a matter of days, I filled vases with fresh flowers and purchased a new workstation, and I didn't have to make room for someone else's needs. For the first time in years, I updated my phone number. I informed my employer that I would be working from home for an indeterminate amount of time. And oddly enough, my vitality recovered. Once my family started draining me, I ate consistently, slept better, and had more clarity in my head when I sat at my desk. Julian, my supervisor, phoned me 2 weeks after I had moved to Boulder. I just looked over your updated strategic plan. Alyssa, it's excellent. Have you thought of assuming the role of West Coast Regional Coordinator? I hesitated for a second. If I had heard those words a year ago, I probably would have declined, since I still had concerns about Nathan, Mom, and Amanda. However, I gave a strong response as I glanced out the window at the sunshine gleaming through the pine trees. Julian laughed and said, I'm ready. I anticipated that you would be the first person that sprung to mind. Alisa, congratulations. After the call was over, I brewed myself a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a knit blanket on the balcony, and allowed the wind tousle my hair. I had completed the task, that loop in which I was the one providing, and no one ever inquired, Are you okay? Was something I had broken free from. No more texts sent late at night. No more frantic calls that pretend it's only alone. I will reimburse you at the end of the month. I will no longer check my bank account in the morning, and silent fear. Every message I got now came from folks who genuinely cared. Old friends, coworkers, or some new people I met in Boulder yoga sessions. Nobody requested money. They only inquired as to whether you wanted to go out to dinner tonight or how you were feeling today. Not only had I gained freedom, once more, I had discovered who I was. I returned to the coffee shop from years ago one day and sat at the same table near the window. The proprietor of the store could still somewhat recall me. I take it you've been here before. You asked me about the jazz track I was playing that day, didn't you? I chuckled. I was that person. I presently reside here. He gestured out the window. Many individuals get healed here. I gave a nod. It was unnecessary to say anything more. I wrote in my journal that evening. I grew up watching over a door for a family who never wanted to see me, just to remove the contents. That door is now locked, and I will keep the key to myself. There was no noise in this new existence. It was silent, but there were no applause, and that was the most opulent item I had ever possessed. In my opinion, I had no idea what lay ahead. I had no idea when Amanda would give me a call. Her voice wavered. However, I was aware of one thing. There was no turning back. I learned to love myself first. Not because I didn't love them. I was watering the plants on my balcony. One cool fall morning when my phone rang with a fresh email. After a few minutes of drinking my tea, I opened my email and halted at the name Melanie Carter, which I had never seen before. I placed her after a few seconds. I had only seen Melanie, Amanda's cousin-in-law, once at a few family get-togethers. A reserved girl who never spoke up and always remained in the background. I was unaware that she had my email address, it said in the subject line, Alyssa. Thank you, I opened it out of curiosity. I doubt you have a good memory of me. I am the daughter of Grace and Melanie. One summer, Amanda asked me to watch Haley. And following Haley's birthday celebration, you took me home in your car. For years, I kept quiet because I believed I had no right to speak up. However, after finding out what you did, how you got up, and how you laid up a boundary, I had no choice but to send this message. I sat still. It seemed like a plummet every time she wrote something, tumbling into my inner quiet pond. I was caught up in a similar pattern. I had to contribute more since my family always claimed I was lucky. Despite working 3 jobs, I still had to send money home for my brother and mom, as well as when I attempted to refuse. They accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. However, after listening to what you did, how you made your own decision, I had the impression that someone had illuminated a way I was unaware of. I learned from you that it's okay to say no. It's self-defense. It's about protecting what you value most. I sat in silence. A now cold teacup was encircled by hands. A couple of the golden maple leaves fell gently to the ground as the wind rustled them outside. However, something had subtly started to grow within of me. It wasn't pride. Vindication was not the case. It was the sensation of being recognized and comprehended. Melanie was not the first to make such a statement. After reading a few sentences, I posted on my personal blog a few weeks prior. An old college acquaintance texted me, "I thought you were just really strong." As if you were self-sufficient, I understand now, though. Everyone thought you would be all right since you were so strong. Regardless. Since I had never begged to be heard for years, I had read that paragraph several times. I kept silent and suppressed my emotions. However, I had never learned that being compassionate does not include allowing others to transgress your boundaries. I took a seat at my desk that evening, turned on my laptop, and composed a response to Melanie. I never thought my actions would motivate someone to that extent. I appreciate your bravery in sharing. I want you to know that you're not alone, even though I know it's not easy. You're not self-centered. You're still learning how to properly appreciate yourself, and that is perfectly okay. Something suddenly became quite evident as soon as I pushed the submit button. In reality, I was redefining family from those who love unconditionally give, without expecting anything in return, and appreciate others as whole human beings. I used to believe that I had lost my family. When I drew back the curtains the following morning, sunshine streamed into the room like a kind gift. I inhaled deeply as I no longer felt something pressing down on my chest. The girl who usually stood aside and kept silent out of concern for other people's feelings, the old Alyssa was no longer me. I was Alyssa now, and I knew when to stop talking. Who knew when to leave someone who didn't respect her? And the most exquisite aspect, somewhere others like Melanie were finding the strength to come out of the shadows, so I wasn't alone. And all of the suffering I had to go through was worthwhile if my path helped illuminate even a little portion of theirs. I walked the cobblestone route to the neighboring park on a Sunday afternoon when the maple trees were turning from green to gold to flaming red leaf after leaf. While her mother rushed behind her yelling and laughing, a young girl wrote on her bike, her hair blowing in the breeze, "Go more slowly, my love." I stopped for a second, viewing them like a scene in a living painting while holding a paper cup of coffee. Something I had lost in previous years was rekindled in me by that sight, a feeling of lightness. I once believed that in order to make my family proud, I had to do all in my power, to get a good daughter title or my mother's approval. I sacrificed vacations, tiny aspirations, and a lot of money to work constantly and save every penny. However, they never paused to inquire whether I was fatigued. Did I require a listener? All they needed was my strength. And when I halted, got up, and refused, they referred to me as ungrateful. I used to worry that I would be perceived as self-centered. I was afraid of losing the blood ties I had worked so hard to maintain. But now that everything was in order, I came to a very basic realization now that the cyclical blaming and midnight calls had stopped. It was painful. My family was not lost to me. I had recently discovered who I was, and the Elisa I am now doesn't live for the approval of others, but of herself. I began performing the small tasks that I had previously put off. I discovered how to prepare my favorite meal, risotto, which I had never had time to make. I purchased a bright red outfit that I used to believe was inappropriate for the workplace. I enrolled in a Saturday pottery class just because I felt alive when I worked with clay. I hung a huge abstract picture in the main room and rearranged my place. Not because it was important, Kelly, a former co-worker who had relocated to Italy, sent me a postcard one day. In nice lettering on the back, it said, "Because of you, I learned what it meant to establish limits without feeling guilty. After 20 years of dreaming but never daring to go to Rome, I finally found the confidence to do it. Thank you, Elisa." Among the little items with significant importance, I set the postcard on my desk. On my first trek in Colorado, I picked up this stone, a leather diary with a vase of dried flowers. I continued to write in. They were all little fragments of Elisa and myself who had died to prove themselves to others. I had given up hoping my family would comprehend. I didn't wait for my mom to send me a surprise message or for Amanda to phone and apologize. They could look back and realize one day, or perhaps not. And that's okay either way. I once believed that love meant clinging to someone. I now understand that loving sometimes requires letting go, allowing others and yourself to take responsibility for their own decisions. You eliminate your own boundaries when you stop trying to be so kind. You'll come to understand that those who genuinely appreciate you won't expect you to sacrifice yourself for them. One author once said, "You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm." I can still clearly recall that phrase. I also came to the realization that sacrifice isn't the source of the hottest light when I quit burning for their aspirations. It originates from the tranquility of existence. Be true to yourself. I strolled carefully down that road littered with leaves. Don't hurry, no way out. Not at all. Alice's tale serves as a potent reminder that you don't have to give up everything to maintain a connection that isn't worthy of being called family when you decide for yourself and establish boundaries. It's not selfishness on your part. You're leading an honest life. That may not be clear to everyone, but the tranquility you discover will be worthwhile, because it's not always a loss to leave relatives behind. It's the first step to discovering your actual self and value again. How do you feel about Alice's decision? Was she correct to prioritize her needs over those of her family? For more touching real-life tales, remember to follow the channel and leave your opinions in the comments section below. Story 3. Alex is my name. I've always been the laid-back one in the family, and I'm 32. Between my two siblings, I am the middle kid. My younger sister Emily is the golden girl, and my elder brother Mark is the golden boy. That made me the silver spoon, I suppose, though not the first choice for anything significant. It is presentable enough maturing. There was nothing Mark could do wrong. My dad's car was once smashed into a ditch by him. When I spilled a glass at dinner, by mistake, I got off with a pat on the back and blamed it on slick roads. Mom gave me a week of cold stillness and a classic, sardonic Alex. That essentially established the tone for everything that came after. I thus didn't anticipate a warm reception when Mark became engaged to Lisa, the most fussy lady I've ever encountered. Lisa's family believes that the term middle class is derogatory. She inquired whether my shoes were old or simply worn out when we first met. I thought she was kidding, so I laughed. She wasn't. After that, there was always a glimmer of contempt beneath her fake grins whenever we spoke, but I remained at a distance. She and Mark deserved each other, I reasoned. Two individuals who are fixated with looks, optics, and situations that may be shared on Instagram. The concept of love appeals to them if it received likes. From the beginning, the wedding preparations were a circus. I volunteered to assist. "We've got it covered," Mark said. I gave them a considerate engagement present, just a framed picture of our grandparents' wedding day. Nothing fancy, something nostalgic. Lisa returned the text. "Thank you. We'll locate a location for it, in the basement. Perhaps? Hehe." I didn't respond. I just changed in my mind the amount I had allocated for their wedding present to something more commercial and less sentimental. I would handle it as though it were a simple requirement 1, 2, or 3 weeks before. To the wedding, I got a call from Mom, simply, dress formally. Please be kind to Lisa's family and avoid overanalyzing the situation. There was weight to that final part. As if she thought I would cause trouble, I refrained from speaking. Yes, I replied. I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't either. I had a promise to uphold, not because I was eager. Years ago, when my father was ill, I promised him that I would always be present for important family occasions. After another round of chemotherapy, we sat in the hospital waiting room and he made me repeat it even if you receive ghostly treatment. He smiled wearily as he spoke, particularly at that time. So I came. The setting was a gorgeous vineyard, the kind you only see in classic films or magazines. There are string lights everywhere. Soft, classical music is being played by a live quartet. People dressed as if they were trying out for a perfume ad. I found the coordinator when I got there early and inquired about my seat. She scowled as she looked at the list and gestured for me to move to the back of the reception tent table. You're actually close to the fire exit. Right there is that chair. I traced her finger. It wasn't even a table, just a folding chair alone tucked between a fake potted tree and a red exit sign. No place card, no table number, no name, just there. I stood still for a second, thinking it was a mistake that someone would run over, apologizing, maybe offering me a seat somewhere real, but no one came. People were arriving in waves, smiles, hugs, cheers. I spotted Emily and Mom near the head table laughing with Mark. I raised a hand. Emily waved half-heartedly. Mom didn't even acknowledge me. I try not to take it personally. Tried. That's when Liza walked by, flanked by two bridesmaids. She saw me standing next to the folding chair and smirked. Oh, you found your seat, she said. Then gave me this once-over like I was a thrift store donation. Only real family gets a real table. I blinked. Excuse me. She didn't even stop walking. Don't take it personally, she said over her shoulder. It's just space was tight. I stood there for another full minute, heartbeat loud in my ears. The envelope in my pocket felt heavier than ever. It was a gift card, but not just any gift card. $1,500 to a luxury spa resort. Something they mentioned in passing during the engagement party. It's the only way to unwind after planning a wedding, Lisa had said, massaging her temples dramatically. I kept the card in an envelope with a handwritten note that said, "Enjoy a peaceful honeymoon on me," but I didn't hand it over. I pulled the envelope out of my coat, looked at it for a moment, then tucked it back in. I turned around, walked toward the front of the tent, and as I passed the champagne table, I said, just loud enough, "Enjoy the honeymoon while it lasts." A few people turned to look. My mom hissed, "Don't make a scene." Her eyes were hard, like she was already preparing her speech about how I ruined the day. But I didn't shout. I refrained from arguing. I just smiled because I already had a plan. A quiet, subtle, slow burn plan. I didn't leave immediately. I wanted to stay long enough to plant the seed. I made my way to the open bar and ordered a soda, casually sipping while watching the chaos swirl around the bride and groom. Lisa was glowing for now, circling from one curated photo opportunity to the next. Mark looked a little overwhelmed, but he always did when he didn't have a script to follow. The photographer shouted directions. The bridal party flitted around, adjusting bouquets and reapplying lipstick. And I just stood there like a shadow. Nobody took attention. Well, almost no one. My cousin Sarah, the only person in our family with a working emotional radar, discovered me near the bar. "Hey," she said, giving me that look. "Have compassion. Have I burned this house down with you? If you spoke the word, I just heard from the coordinator where they positioned your foldable chair beside the fire escape," I said, lifting my glass in faux salute. "Real classy." Her face twisted. "You didn't deserve that." "No," I agreed. But I've learned not to expect much. We spoke for a few minutes, largely trivial things, until I noticed the DJ starting to set up. That was my cue. I nodded toward the reception tent. "I suggested that you have your phone handy for later." Sarah's eyebrows went up. "Do I need to worry?" "Unless you're a fan of Lisa's curated reality," I said with a smile. She made no inquiries. She only smiled. If you need backup, text me. Before supper was served, I sneaked out. Nobody took attention. Not Mark, not your mother, not even Lisa. When someone recorded her spinning beneath a chandelier, she was too preoccupied to fix her hair. I parked my car past a small security booth and a row of food vans along the gravel path. After a minute behind the wheel, I took out my phone and opened the folder I had been working on for the past 3 months. It began with brief screen grabs, primarily text messages from Lisa to the wedding coordinator, reprimanding her for trivial things like using too many beige napkins. Lisa made fun of Mark's mother, our mother, for being uninteresting in a few social media postings from her own Instagram account. I have a copy of the email she unintentionally keyed me on when she intended to disparage the dead weight family, including myself. The true treasure, however, was a voice memo, a brief, sour tirade she recorded during her marriage shower, in which she boasted that Mark's money was only her beginning spouse fund and referred to him as a temporary face. As a prank, she had forwarded it to one of her bridesmaids. My ex, who also happened to be tired of Lisa's shenanigans, was friends with the bridesmaid, Amanda. That memo, too. Just imagine that it had a date stamp, a clear audio recording, and just enough venom to make even the most ardent wedding attendee cringe. For weeks, I had been sitting on it trying to decide what to do with it. I wanted to be the larger person, at first. Let Mark do it on his own. Lisa looked at me like I was gum on her shoe, but suddenly the folding chair, the name that was missing, drew my attention, and my mother, my own mother, didn't even bat an eye. That's what I decided to do. I sent a burner email with the audio file attached. I made a group message after that. Not all of them, just enough to cause a stir. Identify some of his groomsmen, a few of Lisa's cousins who were uneasy whenever she spoke, Amanda Sarah, and one specific recipient who would be the actual accelerant, who was Lisa's former boyfriend. Fun fact, she had met him during a Vegas ladies' vacation only 6 weeks prior. Since I wasn't asked to speak at the reception, I provided a brief remark. I thought I would share my toast with you here. Well done, I sent it, shut off the application. I then took a car home. I discovered 12 missed calls, 38 text messages, and a voicemail from my mother that began, "What did you do?" When I woke up the next morning and concluded with, "Alex, you had best solve this." I didn't hear the others. I decided to read the aftermath after making coffee and opening my laptop. It had blown up in the group conversation. Amanda had sent the message to yet more recipients. It was posted to a subreddit dedicated to wedding rumors. Already, it was popular. Alongside quotations from the letter, a screenshot of Lisa's Instagram post titled "Best Day Ever" was being sewn into memes, the starter husband fund. My favorite book seems like a one-time deal, but the real deal. Mark hadn't posted anything. Nora, thank you, Nora picture. Even marriage doesn't start. A status report. Radio silence. Sarah texted me at noon. The luncheon after the wedding was called off. Lisa apparently locked herself in the restroom of the hotel. Mark gave his friends a home. He seemed to have been struck by a truck. I wasn't done yet, so I didn't respond. There was yet another thing I was planning. I waited a day. Not because I was anxious, since the quiet was louder than any argument I could have orchestrated. I must admit that I had never felt more at ease. No irate texts for Mark. Don't backpedal, Lisa apologizes. Not even a little bit. We must speak with Mom. Only this weird void, as if everyone was acting as though I didn't exist. Ironically, they had been treating me in this manner for years. It wasn't on their terms this time, though. The fissures were beginning to emerge by the second night I got a call from Sarah. It was a full-on call, not a text, which was unusual for her. When I replied, I heard her release her breath as if she had been waiting all day to do so. All right, you must understand what is going on. How are you two? Half smiling, I said. She said, no, really. It has the drama of an implosion. The voice memo had apparently been sent to Lisa's extended family WhatsApp group. Not amused was her aunt, who had paid for half of the wedding flowers. Already her parents had shown little interest in Mark. They were now ashamed that their ideal daughter had used her marriage as a publicity stunt to raise money. The recording made Lisa giggle and declare, "I'll keep him around until the condo construction is finished," despite her attempts to spin it as being taken out of context. After that, it's whatever. I'm not going to establish a future with him, even if he's nice. Yes, very endearing. Mark, meantime, was in shock, since he had always been in denial about Lisa's warning signs. Sarah claimed that he had not returned home following the wedding. He reportedly spent the most of Monday pacing the living room with his phone in hand and muttered stuff like that while staying at his groomsmen. Ryan's house, was this the way it was always? How could I have missed this? Admittedly, I wasn't pleased that he was in pain. He's my brother, even though we weren't close. I didn't want to ruin him. All I wanted was for him to see. To see what I had been seeing all along, that he wasn't loved by Lisa. I was never truly protected by that mother. That at most, I had served as a background figure, a prop, and a trustworthy wallet. However, I hadn't even reached the final step of my strategy. See the gift card to the spa. I didn't call it off. A week prior to the wedding, I diverted it. I changed the name and moved it into a reservation. Lisa was a female coworker, someone she detested. Jasmine, her coworker Lisa, once described the person as a social climber who was always wearing imitation backs. The anecdote was told to me over a family meal when Lisa took over the table and talked about workplace politics, as though no one else was paying attention. Lisa said that Jasmine had once ventured to ask her if they could divide the cost of a group meal. I thus understood what I was doing when I contacted the spa and altered the receiver name to Jasmine W. Plus Visitor. Sarah claims that the morning after the brunch was canceled, Lisa called to make the appointment, but Lisa wouldn't know until then. Lisa. Hello? Yes, please confirm that I have a couple's massage reservation. It's beneath. Hold on, what are you saying? It's been cleaned already, Jasmine. Who is she? Do you mean me? On the other end, I could almost hear the glass breaking, that small detour. It wasn't retaliation, it was artistic. Finally, later that night, Mom called. I waited for it to ring twice before answering. She spoke sharply, tight with humiliation. It was not your place to ruin your brother's wedding in that way. I reclined in my seat. I was not aware that I had been invited. Alex, don't be smart. I wasn't attempting to be precise. As usual, she let out a sigh when I didn't comply. You have no idea how difficult it is to keep a family together. I've been told my entire life that I'm not truly a part of it. So I answered in a low voice, no. She hesitated. Between us, I could hear the static of her quiet. You created a commotion. At last, she said, no, I said. You caused a commotion by remaining silent while you observed me sitting near the fire escape by myself. I just switched on the lights. Before she could respond, I hung up. Sarah emailed me a screen grab of Lisa's Instagram later that week. The wedding pictures were no longer there, each and every one. Suddenly, her account was filled with yoga positions, beach phrases, and ambiguous descriptions like, sometimes growth means letting go, and healing isn't linear. However, Mark's account had remained unaltered. Radio silence continues. I didn't stop watching, though, because the true unraveling was still taking place behind closed doors, even if the consequences had begun publicly. Mark needed to make some choices. Mom was going to have to endure the anguish of a son who had finally refused, and Lisa had answers to make. However, none of them were aware of the final step I had taken. Not quite yet. Because of the guy Lisa saw in Vegas, her ex-boyfriend. Yes, he sent me a message. It turned out that he had his own travel stubs, receipts, pictures, and an email confirming his hotel stay that included Lisa's name and his date for that particular weekend. She informed Mark that she was getting back in touch with her bridesmaids, and I suspected Mark would want to see them, but not in a spiteful manner. No more. Because sometimes quiet retaliation is the best kind. It's not mean, it's just the truth presented in the appropriate manner and at the appropriate moment. The music faded and the least fairy tale turned back into dust when the wedding lights dimmed. At last, the moment was perfect. I waited precisely 1 week longer. Some things take time to sink in. Not because I was procrastinating, Mark, too. It took him a while to come to terms with betrayal. He was the type of man who required alone, silence, and encouragement. My brother was someone I knew. In his life, he believed in the best-case scenario, the fairy tale and the glossy exterior, that everything would work itself out if you smiled for the pictures and said the right things. He could not, however, ignore this. Not when every word seemed like a warning he didn't hear until it was too late in that voice message. Not when his spouse, who had vowed to love him, was exposed as someone who made fun of him in private. And not when others who observed and supported the delusion eventually ceased maintaining it. On a Thursday morning when it rained, I got an SMS from Mark. It wasn't long, we must speak. May I visit? I took a moment to look at the screen before responding. Yes, at any moment. He arrived looking like a man who had ran a marathon without ever realizing he had begun one, with a crumpled hoodie that didn't fit the polished, well-groomed version of himself, and bags under his eyes that made him appear pale, like a prize. Lisa used to shine. Without saying anything, and without taking off his shoes, he entered my flat, failed to set. He dripped as he stood there. I had no idea. Silently, he said, I am aware that he got caught slinking out after rubbing the back of his neck like he used to do when we were youngsters. It's not a justification, I had no desire to find out. I gave a nod. That's how you continued to live. He took a seat on my couch's edge as if it might vanish beneath him. I gave the entire recording 5 listens. I then reviewed some of the things you sent throughout the years and went over our messages. Things I dismissed. After pausing, he turned to face me. The only person who ever told the truth was you. I took a while to reply. Not because I was at a loss for words, but rather because those words finally carried weight. My brother saw me for the first time in perhaps 10 years. As a person, not as a stand-in or a visitor in his ideal existence, he neglected to fight for his sibling. She said that I made her feel ashamed, and he mumbled that she only went through with the wedding because she didn't want to start over, and that I wasn't ambitious enough to match her image. It wasn't humorous when he laughed. Before we even said, I do, she stated all of that. He remarked, Am I really that blind? After being silent, I rested my elbows on my knees and leaned forward. Mark, you weren't blind. All you were afraid of was what you might see. After sitting there for a while, he glanced up at last. I gave a lawyer a call. I arched an eyebrow. She was intelligent, he went on. She created various shared accounts but did not put her name on my condo. I was informed by one of her bridesmaids that she intended to gradually deplete it over several months. They were frozen for me. An annulment is being prepared by lawyers. I blinked so quickly. He grinned glumly. It turns out that having a marriage that is almost legal makes things easier, and there is ample evidence of fraud. A pause occurred. Then he posed the unexpected inquiry. Why did you put off taking action for so long? I wanted you to find it out on your own, so I stared him in the eye. Slowly, he nodded. You didn't wait forever, though. No, I said, because you eventually went too far. Or perhaps she did. Mom might have, I'm not sure. I just know that I had been giving bits of myself to people who wouldn't even grant me a place at the table until something broke as I sat down in that folding chair near the fire escape. I could see the embarrassment seeping into Mark's face as he winced. His voice cracked as he continued. I'm sorry, Alex. For that, for everything, for allowing her to mistreat you, for allowing me to treat you in that manner. Since it wasn't, I didn't say it was all right. However, I did express my gratitude, and it was plenty for us. For a time, we sat in quiet. The rain seemed to have something to say, but it was unable to find the right words. After a while, Mark rose up and used his sleeve to wipe his face. He informed her that she would be leaving the flat tomorrow, didn't resist at all. I just asked if she could keep the coffee maker. I chuckled. Permit her, if she wants to start anew with only her pride and Instagram quips, she's going to need as much coffee as she can get. That gave him a genuine smile. He turned at the door before leaving. I don't believe I ever said to you how much your father trusted you. I arched an eyebrow. Once Mark went on, he informed me that you would be the one to keep this family honest if something were to happen to him. The knot in my throat was swallowed. Sadly, nobody paid attention. We're listening now, I said. Mark answered. I let out a long sigh as the door closed behind him. Not because I was relieved precisely, but because I had finally received recognition for the years I had spent being ignored, brushed aside, and treated like furniture at my own family's gatherings. Not rectified, not reversed, but observed. Mom gave me another call 3 days later. She didn't reprimand me this time. She didn't stand up for Lisa. I wasn't even asked to apologize by her. She invited me to join her for supper, only the two of us. I nearly declined, but I had a gut feeling that this wasn't about duty. Smoothing things out for show wasn't the goal. Perhaps it was her way of acknowledging how much she had neglected the boy who always showed up while never demanding attention. I said yes, to establish new conditions at dinner, not to make amends. She didn't mention the voice memo. Lisa or the wedding. I'm sorry I didn't notice. She said. I responded, I noticed you didn't. After giving her a long look, she then gave a nod. Something better was about to begin. 2 weeks later, Mark sought for annulment. Lisa did not argue. The social media backlash was spectacular. A wedding highlight reel that unexpectedly disappeared, cryptic messages, and removed comments. Within a month, she was back living with her parents and applying for brand offers that didn't exist because her starter spouse fund went out quicker than she could refresh her browser. I wrote a message and sent her a little folding chair as a parting present. A genuine table is only given to real families. I hope the best for you. I wasn't expecting foreclosure from her, but it's clear that she blocked me. A peaceful Sunday breakfast served as the resolution. Mark, Sarah, and I alone in a downtown cafe. We caught up on life, joked over the voice memo, and most importantly, talked like true equals. Similar to Family One that can see you. Not beside the fire escape, but the sort that saves you a seat. I finally felt like I belonged in the middle. When I sat there, this time story 4. I looked incredulously at my phone. I just received a call from my mother asking me to my parents' place for supper. We hadn't spoken in months, and I hadn't been there in a year. I'm Dana, the family's black sheep, and I'm 32 years old. That's what they believe anyhow. I was always second best as a child. Melissa was my younger sister. She was the perfect child. She had a knack of making everyone, especially our parents, adore her, and she was more attractive and charming. They weren't being mean to me. It was obvious that they liked her more. They would be too busy to attend the dancing recitals. When Melissa's turn came, they would somehow find time. My sister's mediocre grades, which earned me lectures, somehow turned into her greatest effort. With a groan, I set my phone down on the counter in my kitchen, a tiny luxury in the condo. The marble felt cold to the touch. I didn't mention it to them. Mom called now. But why? What were they seeking? All right, I whispered to myself. However, I arrived at my parents' modest suburban house a week later. I purposefully wore pants, a basic top, and little jewelry. There was nothing that would suggest I was anything other than the middle manager who was having trouble. They believed I was inhaling deeply. The doorbell rang. The door was opened by Dad. Donna, enter, enter. His greeting was sincere, yet preoccupied. I could see why Melissa was presiding over the couch as soon as I entered the living room. As she made a lot of gestures and related a narrative about her workplace conflict, Mom and Dad's whole attention was on her. Her flawless grin never wavered as she stopped speaking when she noticed me. Oh, she continued in a falsely lovely voice, the prodigal daughter is back. Mom sprang to her feet. We're so happy you could make it, honey. She gave me a quick embrace before heading back to her place next to Melissa. I took a seat in the armchair across from them and observed Melissa's hardly disguised disdain as she looked over my attire. She smirked and remarked, I love the thrift store chic look. Thanks, I said plainly. Designer labels are not necessary for everyone to feel good about themselves. Dad cleared his throat. Your mother has prepared a delicious meal. Donna, in around 20 minutes it should be ready. Before Mom said supper was ready, we engaged in uncomfortable small conversation. Around the dining table, we were seated. The same one I grew up with. Dad filled everyone's glasses with wine. Melissa started talking about her work at a marketing company right away. I felt like they were pleading with me to take on the Johnson account, she said. Said that I was the only person capable of handling it. That's fantastic. My love, Mom smiled and went to give her a hand pat. Dad abruptly turned to face me. Donna, how about you still working at the same organization? What was it? Assistant manager before responding? I took a drink of wine. Do you still work at Berkshire? Financial indeed. Melissa gave a snort. You've been there for 8 years now? Dawn God. By your age, most individuals would have advanced. I mean, in the last 4 years, I've had 3 promotions. If they only knew that I had been the finance director of Berkshire for the last 3 years, I could feel my jaw tighten. That previous year, I was included in Business Weekly's 40 Under 40, and that my yearly bonus alone exceeded Melissa's entire income. However, they had never inquired, so they were unaware, never gave a damn enough to follow my life. Rather than correcting her, I just grinned. Not everyone is as talented or driven as you are, Mel. As she gave Melissa another portion of mashed potatoes, Mom said. This was the direction of the discourse. During dinner, Melissa spoke about her forthcoming Hawaiian vacation, her envious coworkers, and her fantastic pay. In the end, my parents praised her profusely and asked follow-up questions. They never asked me any insightful questions about my life. Melissa said, I've been saving for Hawaii for months, but it's not that hard when you make good money. She gave me a cocky glance. I pushed my plate aside and remarked, that sounds fantastic. However, I should probably leave early. We'll meet tomorrow, Mom. Thank you for supper. I gathered my handbag as I arose. Melissa and Dad stayed at the table as Mom escorted me to the door. As I drove back to my apartment downtown, she patted my shoulder and said, It was good to see you, honey. I couldn't get rid of the suspicion that my invitation had been sent with a hidden agenda. In any case, I was happy to be going home. Back in my roomy flat, I poured myself a good glass of wine and kicked off my shoes. Not what my folks provided, which was inexpensive. I was just getting comfortable on my balcony overlooking the downtown skyline. I got a ping on my phone. Melissa sent a message. I hope your melancholy little existence isn't getting to you, sis. Success is not achievable for everyone. I suppose I'll send you a postcard from Hawaii, so don't worry. After looking at the message for a while, I started chuckling. If only she were aware I took another sip of my wine and closed the message without replying. In my opulent apartment on the 28th floor overlooking the glittering city lights, I didn't always have such a tense relationship with my family. Before Melissa was born, I was quite young. It was different. I vaguely recall my mom reading bedtime tales and my dad throwing me into the air. But when Melissa came when I was 4, everything was different. She was the ideal child. Seldom did they cry. Her large blue eyes seemed to captivate everyone who saw her, and she was always grinning. The pattern became evident when I was 10 years old. I was recently there, and Melissa was unique. I did everything I could to please them. I volunteered on the weekends, studied until midnight, and joined every club. I served as the yearbook editor debate team, captain and valedictorian in high school. However, my parents' chairs were vacant as I made my graduation speech and looked around for their joyful expressions. Instead, they had brought Melissa to her dancing competition. Something inside of me broke that day. I understood that my efforts would never be sufficient. I so gave up attempting to please people and began living for myself. After graduating with honors and receiving a full scholarship to Princeton, I was hired by Berkshire Financial. I was leading my own team. In 5 years, I was elevated to the position of financial director 3 years ago, and I didn't share any of it with them. My phone began ringing, and I was Jared. From my recollections, Mom was back. I was hesitant to respond. Hi there. Next Saturday, we will have a family get-together. Everyone will be present, and your cousins, Carol and Uncle Jim. We want you to join us, I scowled. What's the event? Just a family meeting, I see. We have a noteworthy announcement to make, she said in an intentionally ambiguous tone. I ought to have declined. My gut advised me to avoid it. However, my curiosity overcame me. All right, at what time? Forceful. Donna also made an effort to dress correctly. I hung up looking like I usually showed up in tatters, fuming properly. On Saturday, I stood contemplating in my walk-in closet. At last, I decided on a basic black dress Chanel. To the untrained eye, it appeared small, yet it cost more than Melissa's monthly wage. You wouldn't know, though, until you saw the delicate stitching and fabric quality. There were automobiles lining the driveway. When I got to my parents' house, I recognized Uncle Jim's vehicle and Carol's automobile. I inhaled deeply before going inside. Carol and Donna yelled and drew me into an embrace. Years have passed. Look at you. You're so mature and reasonable. I made an effort to grin. Nice to see you as well. And Carol. I spent the next 15 minutes chit-chatting with relatives I could hardly recall while my parents and Melissa sat in a corner muttering to each other and looking at me every now and again. They were obviously thrilled about this announcement, whatever it was. At last, Mom summoned everyone to the dining table, which had been enlarged to seat the 15 or so family members in attendance. After we were all seated with our meal plates, she got up and used a spoon to tap her glass. There's a special reason we brought you all here today, she said with a smile. Melissa is going to share some amazing news. Melissa got to her feet, dramatically clearing her throat. 2 weeks ago, she said, her voice brimming with pride, I purchased my own Westridge Heights apartment. Applause broke out in the room. While not the most affluent neighborhood in town, Westridge Heights was undoubtedly one of the nicer ones. It's a beautiful 2-bedroom, Melissa added. The down payment was provided by parents. She blew them a kiss, of course, and they grinned broadly in return. The housewarming party is when Melissa was called out by Cousin Brian. Yes, I still haven't made up my mind. Still working on making everything flawless. I took a sip of water and grinned to myself. Well done. It was a nice accomplishment, even if she needed our parents' help. Mom's voice was unusually loud as she abruptly turned to face me. Donna, you haven't congratulated your sister. All eyes turned to me. Melissa giggled. She's probably just jealous. Not everyone can afford property in this market. My parents exchanged knowing smiles. Then Mom, making sure everyone could hear, said, well, it'll be a long time before Donna can match this achievement. Property ownership is for those with real careers. The table fell silent, everyone watching for my reaction. They expected embarrassment, perhaps tears or stammering excuses. Instead, I laughed a genuine, spontaneous laugh. Actually, I said I bought my place 2 years ago. Melissa's smile faltered. A condo, you mean, or a townhouse? I took another bite of food, chewing slowly, making them wait. No, it's an apartment. 4 bedrooms corner unit with a wraparound terrace in Lakeside Tower. Gasps around the table. Lakeside Tower was the most exclusive address in the city. That's impossible, Melissa sputtered. You're a middle manager. You couldn't afford a broom closet in Lakeside. I dabbed my lips with a napkin. I'd been financial director at Berkshire for 3 years now. My salary and bonuses are comfortable. The shock on their faces was priceless. Dad's work clattered onto his plate. Financial director, he repeated. Why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze evenly. None of you ever asked? A heavy silence fell over the table. Then Mom's expression suddenly softened. Darling, that's wonderful news. When are you having your housewarming? We'd love to see this apartment. I had my housewarming 2 years ago, I replied calmly with friends. Mom's smile stiffened. Melissa's face had turned an interesting shade of red. The rest of my relatives were looking at me with newfound interest, as if seeing me for the first time. Uncle Jim raised his glass. Well, congratulations, Donna. That's quite an achievement. Others murmured agreement while my parents and Melissa sat in stunned silence as dinner continued. I noticed how everyone suddenly wanted to talk to me, ask about my job, my life. People who had barely acknowledged me for years were now hanging on my every word. I didn't stay long after my revelation. The atmosphere had become unbearable, my relatives suddenly fawning over me, Melissa sulking in the corner, and my parents switching between shock and an unsettling eagerness to reconnect. I made my excuses after dessert, citing an early morning meeting. But it's Sunday tomorrow, Mom protested, following me to the door. Global markets don't sleep, I replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. I did have a call with our Tokyo office, but not until the afternoon. The drive home was strangely liberating. For years, I'd hidden my success from them, partly out of spite, partly because their opinion had stopped mattering long ago. Now that the truth was out, I felt oddly light, but also wary. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar comfort. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my living room sofa, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The revelation at dinner replayed in my mind, and suddenly everything clicked: the random dinner invitation last week. Today's family gathering. It all made sense. Now they'd wanted to showcase Melissa's achievement, and by contrast, highlight my supposed failures. They'd gathered the entire family to witness my humiliation. Instead, they'd ended up looking foolish. And now they were scrambling to adjust to this new reality where I wasn't the family disappointment. I was still processing this when my phone began buzzing incessantly. First, my father, then my mother, then Melissa. I silenced it and turned on a movie instead. Whatever they wanted to say could wait until morning. When I finally checked my phone the next day, I had 17 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most were variations of "call us immediately" and "we need to talk." I ignored them all and went about my Sunday routine: yoga brunch with friends and preparation for the upcoming work week. By evening, the messages had taken on a more urgent tone. Finally, a lengthy text from Mom appeared. "We need to speak with you. Your father and I have given this a lot of thought. We've always supported Melissa financially because we thought you were struggling too much to ask for help. Now that we know you're doing so well, we believe as family we should all support each other. Melissa is having trouble with her mortgage payments as her successful sister. Surely you could help. Call us back immediately." I stared at the message in disbelief, then started laughing so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of neglect and favoritism, after attempting to humiliate me in front of the entire family, they now expected me to bail out their golden child. I typed a response: "I'm not interested in discussing this. You tried to shame me yesterday, and now you're begging for my aid. Please don't contact me again regarding this topic." I could see the 3 dots coming and vanishing as Mom started and stopped typing many times. "Finally, you're being selfish. Donna, this is what family does. If you reject, you're choosing to exclude yourself from this family. Think carefully about this." I didn't bother answering. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine. There was a peculiar air of finality to it, a chapter of my life finishing. It stung, but less than I imagined. The next morning at work, I buried myself in quarterly reports and budget meetings. Being finance director of a big corporation kept me busy enough to shove family strife to the back of my mind. By midweek, I'd virtually forgotten about the whole incident. Then my assistant buzzed my office. "2 people in reception are adamant about seeing you, Miss Williams. They're your parents," they say. My hand was hovering above the keyboard when I froze. "Inform them that I have a meeting. They promised to wait as long as it took." I let out a sigh and considered my alternatives. Send them in once I've had 5 minutes. I hurriedly fixed my suit jacket and cleaned my desk. As my parents entered my corner office with its expansive views, their faces were a combination of artistic and determined looks. Dad said, "Nice place." his gaze resting on the honors and certifications on my credenza. Thank you. How may I help you? I spoke in a professional manner, as though they were just another unexpected guest. Mom came forward. Donna, we must talk about Melissa's predicament. She finds it difficult to make her mortgage payments along with your financial achievements. I am aware, I forcefully interrupted, Melissa's mortgage is not being paid by me. Dad's cheeks flushed. Listen up, young woman. Family is helpful. Family I always have, as has your mother. What is always the case? Quietly, I asked. Always supported me, always gave me equal support. Showed up for all of my significant events. They looked at one another uncomfortably. That's not the same. Melissa required extra care, according to Mom. She had greater sensitivity. She now requires additional funds. I'm family again. All of a sudden, I gave a headshake. When you skipped my high school graduation, you didn't think of me as family. Not to mention the dozen birthdays and holidays I spent by myself or my college commencement. You're acting absurdly. Dad lost his temper. Your folks are where? In a biological sense? Yes, but years ago, you ceased to behave like parents. I stood to indicate that our meeting was over. I need to get to work. Mom's face grew stern. You will regret it if you abandon us now. In the end, family is all you have. You have never been more like family to me than my pals. I hit the intercom button. Nancy, show my guests around. Dad turned back as they walked away. Donna, you're making a grave error. It's not over yet. I reclined in my chair as the door shut behind them. Feelings whirling. A stronger part of me felt glad, as though I had finally gotten rid of something harmful from my life, while another part of me wanted to cry. Over the following several weeks, I pushed myself into my work, working longer hours and taking on more tasks. My coworkers were sufficiently professional to detect any difference in my conduct. Not to bring it up, I turned down offers to weekend breakfasts and after-work cocktails because I preferred the privacy of my flat or the diversion of lengthy runs along the river. Then my phone called with an unknown number over a month after the altercation at work. Hi there, I gave a cautious response. Donna, it's out. Carol. Though we had never been close, Carol had always been the least critical of my family, so I felt a little more at ease. Hello, Carol. How are you? She replied, her voice down, as though she was worried about being overheard. I thought you should know what's happening. Everyone is hearing from your parents that you're a horrible person. They're arguing that despite your wealth, you won't aid your sister. They are currently having trouble paying her mortgage. I gave a dry laugh. I'll guess Dad works the weekends and Mom has taken on extra work. That's right. How did you find out? Because they want that story to be told. While the self-centered rich parent declines to assist the poor, industrious parents give up all for their suffering daughter. Carol paused. Is it accurate to say that you aren't assisting them? Indeed, it's accurate. My sister's mortgage is not something I'm paying. May I inquire why? With a groan, I paced my living room. Carol, do you recall when I graduated from high school? Naturally, the valedictorian was you. You gave a beautiful speech. There were no parents present. Instead, they attended Melissa's dance recital. They also did not attend my college graduation. They were my second when I received my first promotion. It wasn't until that dinner that I informed them that I had been appointed financial director. They have been treating me as if I were invisible for years, except if they were looking for something to contrast Melissa with. I hesitated. My throat constricted. And all of a sudden, they are only interested in my life because they believe I can help them with their issues. There was a pause in the line. Carol finally admitted that I was unaware of the severity of Melissa's increased attention. I simply believed that you ought to be aware of their words. I appreciate the heads up. Thank you. I hung up and wandered to my balcony to gaze at the skyline of the city. Was I being uncaring? Perhaps. However, I had learned to defend myself from years of emotional neglect. Long ago, my parents had made their decision consistently picking Melissa over me. They could now accept the repercussions. The following morning, I decided I had been putting off a 3-week vacation to Europe for far too long. So I opened my laptop and made the reservation: Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I eat at fantastic restaurants, go to museums, and completely ignore family drama. My mother sent me a text as I was completing the reservations. Yesterday, your sister lost her job. She is now undoubtedly unable to pay her mortgage. If you don't help, she'll lose her apartment. Is that what you want? I stared at the message, shaking my head at the manipulation. I typed back, what I want is for you all to handle your own problems like adults. I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks. Please don't contact me again. I blocked her number before she could respond, then did the same with my father's and Melissa's. It was severe but essential. I couldn't go forward if I kept being sucked back into their turmoil. The day before my travel, I had lunch with my best friend, Tara. We'd met in college, and she'd been my support through every career milestone and personal crisis. So you're truly cutting them off? She inquired as we settled into our favorite cafe. I already have, I answered, spreading my napkin on my lap. I banned their numbers, and I urged security at work not to let them in again. Well, she swirled her iced drink thoughtfully. Are you cool with that? They're still your family, are they? Though I gazed out the window. Family is meant to be there for you when you need them, encourage you, and care about your accomplishments. None of it has ever been done by them. I felt lighter than I have in years as I boarded my trip to Paris the next day. There was nobody in the seat next to me. A little extra on a lengthy journey. The flight attendants were just locking the doors as I got comfortable, opened my book, and got ready to take off. I received an email notice on my phone. The subject line said, "From Dad," but the address was unknown. After hesitating, I opened it. Your juvenile conduct has disappointed your mother and myself, Donna. Refusing to talk about family issues and blocking our numbers. We didn't raise you like this. Melissa is having trouble. Additionally, you have an obligation to assist as her sister. In order to pay her mortgage this month, we had to take money out of our retirement funds. Is this the girl we brought up, a self-centered lady who prioritizes lavish trips over the needs of her family? While you are gallivanting throughout Europe, consider what you are doing. I put my phone on airplane mode after deleting the email without replying. Before long, we were ascending above the clouds as the engines roared to life underneath me. The metropolis shrank and shrank until it was but a dot. Then nothing at all. I spent 3 weeks immersed in culture, history, and the arts. I ate gelato by the Trevi. Fountain strolled around Paris at daybreak and watched the sunset from a beach near Barcelona. I didn't post any of the hundreds of pictures I took to social media so my relatives could view them. I was alone in these moments. My final night overseas. I came to a realization as I was seated at a tiny cafe in Rome. I had lost my anger. The pain persisted, a lifeless lake under my ribcage. However, the blazing animosity had subsided. Melissa and my parents had already made their decisions. I had also created mine. We were all dealing with the fallout. My flat seemed even more like a haven when I got home rejuvenated and tanned. There was a pile of mail bills, magazines, and a letter from Tara, who had traveled to Seattle for a conference, on my kitchen counter. Nothing from my relatives. I ordered takeout, unpacked, and sat down with a glass of wine on my balcony. I had freedom emotionally as well as financially. It was my way forward alone to make a decision, free from past hurts and expectations. I grinned as I lifted my glass to the starry sky. Cheers to the future.